In a commencement address, the author George Saunders shared a story from his youth. When he was in the 7th grade, there was a girl in his class named Ellen. Ellen didn't quite fit in, and the other kids made sure that she knew it. They rolled their eyes when she spoke. They whispered in the hallways. They watched her sit alone in the lunchroom. George wasn't one of the cruel kids. He didn't tease Ellen, but he didn't sit with her either. He didn't do anything to make it stop. And decades later, standing at that podium, he said, "What I regret most in my life are my failures of kindness. Not the big mistakes, not the obvious wrongs, but the silences. The moments when he could have made someone's life easier, lighter, less lonely, and didn't." I suspect that many of us carry a story like that. The time that we saw something wrong and looked away. The day we knew someone needed support and hesitated. They're not dramatic betrayals. They are quiet ones that still echo in our souls. And the truth is, we live in a culture that doesn't really reward this kind of self-reflection. We live in a culture that rewards pointing outwards and not in. We're fluent in blame. We blame a friend for pulling away instead of asking what weight they might be carrying. We blame politicians for every fracture in our democracy, but refuse to face how our own cynicism and disengagement widens the divide. We blame the media for spreading lies, even as we read and share clickbait stories knowing that they're meant to rile us up. But Yom Kippur encourages us to ask ourselves, what part did I play? What did I, through my silence, normalize bad behavior by ignoring it? This evening, Kol Nidrei began not with the grand failures, but with these smaller, more personal ones that live close to us. The promises and vows that we made, but did not keep. The tenderness we could have extended, but withheld. The courage that we hoped to summon, but never did. That is why the melody haunts us when we fail to keep our promises to speak when it matters, to act when kindness calls. The consequences, they ripple outwards. Silence may begin as something small, personal, and private, but when multiplied across a community, silence creates the space where cruelty takes root. What begins as hesitation in one heart, repeated in many different hearts, can grow into a culture. A culture where fear is amplified, a culture where suspicion spreads, a culture where cruelty is tolerated as normal. That is why our tradition doesn't just ask us to confess what we've done. It asks us to notice what kind of world is created when people are silent and stop showing up with courage. And that's why we tell stories like the one about a king named Balak. Balak was a Moabite king, and we learn about him in the Torah. He looked out and saw our ancestors, the Israelites, who were recently freed slaves, camped near his border. They had not attacked. They had not made demands, but their very pressure and presence unsettled him. Balak saw the Israelites, and questions began to sort of spiral in his mind. Who are these people, And what do they really want? Balak feared not only the Israelites' strength, he feared being exposed as weak before his own people. And rather than learning more about them, he invented answers. He called the Israelites invaders, not because of what they had done, but because framing them as a danger gave him power. If they were an enemy, defensive action was justified. If they were an enemy, his people would rally behind him. And once he declared them dangerous, well, he could do whatever he wanted. It's a pattern as old as time. Leaders who call neighbors invaders or threats. They declare truth a lie and lies a truth. So he hired Balaam, a prophet for hire, to curse a people he also had never met and knew nothing about. And Balaam was willing because fear always finds someone ready to profit. But something interrupted Balaam as he traveled to curse the Israelites in the wilderness. 3 times the donkey he was riding veered from the road, and he beat the beast repeatedly so that she would stay on task. But Balaam's donkey saw more clearly than he did. An angel sent from heaven was in their way, and the prophet was blind to it, while the creature he dismissed as an irrational beast saw the truth. Later, when Balaam stood before the Israelites ready to curse, God intervened again. And Balaam's words, which were meant to curse, emerged instead as a prayer of hope. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. How good are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. The lesson of Balak and Balaam is stark. His was a leadership of fear, paranoia, incitement, and curse. A leadership fueled by a need to cling to his own power. And history shows us that when societies normalize fear and contempt, trust erodes, and communities slowly unravel and corrode from within. This is the world that Balak built. And it is a world that we dare not accept today. We cannot counter a culture of fear by echoing its rage. We do not answer cruelty by becoming cruel ourselves. On this day, our tradition calls us to an ancient ritual that guides us inward and asks us to choose a new path. It's the sound of the vidui, the confession that we just did. We beat our chests and say an acrostic of sins, Ashamnu, Bagadnu, Gazalnu, Dibarnu Dofi, not once, but again and again and again. Not alone, but aloud, together. These words are not meant to bury us in guilt. They are meant to lift us into a sense of responsibility. The prayer reminds us that responsibility is never abstract. Ashamnu says, you have a sliver of influence, so you carry a sliver of responsibility. George Saunders carried his silence as regret for a long time, but he did not remain stuck there. By telling the story aloud, by naming what he wished he had done, he turned his regret into a lesson. It became a choice about how he wanted to live his life. And this is precisely what our tradition asks of us. Ashamnu is not about burying ourselves in guilt. It's about speaking the alphabet of our shortcomings, knocking on our hearts with each word until the door to change begins to open. The Hebrew alphabet has 22 letters. It is complete, from Aleph to Tav, from beginning to end. And still, Rabbi Michael Marmer imagines an additional 23rd letter, a letter that is not on the page, but in our hands, traced in the ways that we live, not written with ink, but with the choices that we make. Each act of courage, each refusal to stay silent, each tenderness that interrupts cruelty is a stroke of that unwritten letter. But we live in a world that feels really fragile right now. Nearly everyone that I speak with these days feels it. Trust feels as thin as a worn thread. Truth somehow seems negotiable. Scapegoating has become a sport. Lies move faster than facts, and cruelty often wears the mask of strength. Just in the last month, it has seemed like every single day gave me material for a separate and timely high holiday sermon. It's been a lot. And even when our own lives may feel relatively steady, there's still that low-key worry. The onslaught of the news, the suspicion that swells louder than compassion, the sense that the norms of civil society are fading quickly, the rising pressure to pick a side, to prove a point, to win the fight. And we know that to live within that framework is exhausting. And in our exhaustion, it is all too easy to pick up the very same weapons to meet contempt with contempt. But if all we do is reflect or magnify the bitterness around us, we will become the very thing that we lament. On the flip side, it can also be all too easy to worship big, empty gestures. The outrage that trends for a day, the slacktivism of posting what we detest, the spectacle that earns likes, the polished protests staged more for a camera than for, real change. But just as empty gestures will not redeem us, neither will grand miracles. If you're waiting for the plagues of Egypt or for the sea to split or for Sinai's thunder to hand us the answers, you're going to be waiting for a very long time. The pull of spectacle is strong, but Judaism has never measured strength in what dazzles. It measures strength in the small, steady choices that actually shape us. Our tradition says that God gave us mitzvot so revelation would not remain locked on a mountain. Instead, it would walk with us into the marketplace, into our homes, and into the ordinary encounters of our lives. The world does not turn on miracles. It turns on smaller acts, the daily choices that we make. In Judaism, we call these mitzvot, sacred acts that transform ordinary life into holy life. The rabbis of the Talmud established mitzvot as the fabric for living, grounded in the bold and beautiful idea that what we do every day matters. Our actions, repeated again and again, can shape the world around us. Now, I know that some hear commandments and think of restrictions, of what we can or what we cannot do. But another way to see mitzvot are as daily acts of blessing, each one a chance to bring a little more light, a little more justice, a little more compassion into the world. And together, those actions form the language of blessing, a language expansive enough to imagine a world still being written. These daily acts rarely make the news. but they are the quiet commitments that hold the world together. The countercultural path our tradition places before us to radiate blessings out. We all know the Balaks of today, turning shadows into threats, neighbors into enemies, selling suspicion as spectacle. When we are at our worst, we echo them, repeating their tactics, amplifying suspicion, and letting contempt pass through our own voices. And sometimes silence, well, it feels a lot safer. We stay quiet not because we agree, but because we are tired, uncertain, and afraid. Yet even that silence has power. As Saunders taught, silence lets cruelty grow louder than kindness. That is why the smallest step towards change can feel so weighty. Every local action matters, but against problems so vast it can feel impossibly small. It takes energy that we may not have, courage we are not sure that we possess. And that is precisely why it's so tempting to look away. It is easier and even accurate to say, this is not my problem. I'm not the one under threat. So I'll pay attention to, something else. But our tradition insists that silence is never neutral. We need to find the still, small voice of conscience that Saunders longed for. We need courage to act when the road is uncertain. What the world desperately needs right now are people willing to stop and bless. This year, someone in your life needs your courage. This year, someone in this city needs your blessing. This year, we can write with a 23rd letter to create a new alphabet of blessing, not with ink, but with our lives. The world will not be saved by the next great leader. It will not be saved by the next election or the next innovation or the next technology. It will be saved or lost by the choices of ordinary people who dare to write blessings when no one is watching. Letter by letter, act by act, an acrostic of blessing. The apology that we finally spoke, blessing in place of arrogance, breaking the silence that allowed cruelty to grow louder than kindness. The bread and soup carried to a neighbor, a friend, or a stranger. Blessing in place of selfishness, honoring the truth of another's hunger and humanity. The curiosity we chose over condemnation. Blessing in place of caricature and vilification. Refusing to reduce a life to a single story. The door that we kept open when anger pressed us to close it. Blessing in place of exclusion. Remembering that they bleed as we bleed, they love as we love. The eyes we opened to those who had been mocked or demonized. Blessing in place of contempt. Discovering that their struggle is real and their lives, no matter how different from ours, are also a gift from God. The forgiveness we risked before we knew how it would be received. Blessing in place of resentment. Choosing courage where fear might have ruled. The grit to remain at the table even when disagreement felt unbearable. Blessing in place of division. Daring to believe that connection is still possible. This is the heart of our people's story. Blessing is not withdrawal from the struggle. It is the struggle. And it is particularly a Jewish form of stubbornness, a way of living that insists that when the world grows dark, we kindle with the light of blessing. because we are the ones that we've been waiting for. We have control over our own lives. We are responsible. And now it is on us, in this new year, to write with a 23rd letter with a language that tells the story of who we dare to become, with courage, with love, and with blessing. Gamar Chatima Tova. May you be inscribed in the book of life for blessing. Amen.